Sadly, Oliver has not joined us here at the cut table, but he did put in a shift earlier today, so perhaps he just needs his rest. The lore surrounding the sewing of sleeves is so richly layered with trauma that the internet has given it its own name. Sleeval. A noun, an adjective, a state of being. It's hard to say. And I have never understood because sleeves are not difficult. Wait. Well, maybe I just don't think so because my sleeve is drafted to fit into my bodice pattern's armscye, and therefore I never have much trouble setting them in when it comes to sewing. And once again, I am left to ponder, are sleeves evil, or are you just using commercial patterns? Today I'll be going over how I flat pattern draft a sleeve from measurements. I will go ahead and then set the sleeve we create together into the bodice pattern I was working on in the last video. We can then go ahead and test the fit of both that sleeve and of the bodice itself once something is set into that armscye. It really sets things into motion that you may not have noticed in your initial fitting. I will be reverting to standard flat pattern drafting for the sleeve because last time I was proving a point, and in this video I'm trying to just simply save you time. Draping on an arm, on yourself, by yourself is really just kind of too bonkers. While the torso you can keep kind of relatively neutral while still working with your arms, once you move one arm to try and draw on the other, you're pulling your shoulders out of whack. Things are a little bit too interconnected to make that entirely feasible. Holding your arms in a very neutral position is difficult enough and after a while would just be taxing, and that's less draping and more just an endurance exercise, so I won't even be attempting that. I mean, again, as always, do whatever you want and what works for you, but I'm not going to try it. And personal specifications for sleeves are important to note because all of us have different expectations of our garments. I often get comments questioning my ability to go bouldering or pole vaulting or to do the backstroke in my fitted garments. And the answer is no, because this is not athleisure. You have been conditioned by modern casual clothing done up in stretch spandex jersey that you should be able to do jumping jacks and cartwheels in every garment ever. But that's simply not a standard most woven garments are expected to uphold. But do you have full range of mobility in that garment? Gotcha. No, sweetheart, but I also don't break into spontaneous yoga at the art museum, nor do I practice gymnastics at the antique mall. So funny enough, it's never bothered me before. No, in my semi-formal beaded brocade evening jacket, I can't raise my arms above my head, but also, why the hell would I need to? Is it possible to fit, gusset, and finesse a woven sleeve so that you can still wear it while performing interpretive modern dance? Yes. Do you need that much range of motion in your daily life? Then go for it. I don't. Sewing is probably the most athletic activity I personally engage in. I'm sort of a fashion girly and not really a Peloton pro. I know that's surprising. My number one concern is how something looks, not even how it feels to wear, but more how I feel when wearing it. You may put pure comfort first. Again, you do you. I put looking like I've just buried my sixth spouse, collected the insurance, and run away with their sister in 1948 first. We all have our own goals. And while I may have said that sewing is my most athletic occupation, we all know that's actually stenciling. But guess what? I don't wear this while I'm painting. I wear a stained, oversized Star Wars tee like a normal person. Not to be Victorian about this, but change your damn clothes based on your planned activity level. Dress for the task at hand. Which is my very long-winded way of saying that the sleeve cap height will determine your range of mobility in a sleeve pattern, so we'll be going over that today. What seems a bit counterintuitive is that the tighter the armscye and the lower the sleeve cap, the more range of mobility you will have in a woven sleeve. Conversely, of course, the lower the armscye on the bodice pattern and the higher the sleeve cap of the sleeve itself, the less mobility you will have in that sleeve. The fabric is cut in such a way that you cannot actually raise your arm in a fitted garment. Of course, this is a bad example because I'm wearing a less fitted garment presently, but you'll see what I mean. What I will have to do today is find the correct compromise between the two. Not correct as in what the book tells me I should do or what any book or standard tells me I should do, but what I feel is best for myself and my own personal wardrobe. But I will rant about fit with far more fanatical fury next time. Let's go ahead and get started. And here is the muslin mock-up that I left off with last time. I was busy transferring over my latest adjustments from this fabric onto my paper pattern, and I did make this adjustment along the center back that I decided was the wrong way to go. Instead of taking this extra fullness out of the center back itself, I want to go ahead and pinch out that 3/8 of an inch from the dart instead. So I will go ahead and just cut off the center back seam allowance off the original center back line. You can see that new line is still chilling there in the green, but I'm going to ignore it from now on. And then I had shifted the dart over to reflect this new angle, and I will just go ahead and use the original dart legs again instead as well. And then I will distribute the 3/8 of an inch instead of along the center back, along each dart. So I'll just split that 3/8 in two and take a little sliver off each side of the dart here, just making my back darts a little bit wider as opposed to taking that fullness from the center back itself. Adding an angled line down the center back really would kind of just distort the rest of what I had going on, so I don't know what my thought process was there. Clearly it was getting late, but with plenty of hindsight and editing the footage, I've decided to change my mind. Otherwise, I'm just making sure that I had transferred over everything correctly the last time, because again, it was like at 9 p.m. and who knows what I was up to. And the reason that I need to perfect my bodice blocks before I can start drafting the sleeve is that the armscye will be important, obviously, when constructing the sleeve cap. So the sleeve will have to fit into this armscye. So I need to get this armscye as perfect as possible. And I realized I had not actually tried this on without the t-shirt underneath it. And because I had been focusing on the general fit and not the armscye and shoulder specifically, I wanted to go ahead and try on the next muslin over just my bra and not the t-shirt as well. So I could refine the fit even further and decide upon the armscye for the bodice before I attempted making a sleeve. And I did undo the dart of the muslin just to make sure I again transferred over the markings along the shoulder onto my pattern as I desired. All right, but now this is looking quite messy, especially with all those dart legs. So let me go ahead and just trace a fresh copy so we can actually get a look at what we're looking at, because this is a mess. This is why, again, another good reason to go ahead and just make fresh copies each time. Although someone did point out to me that it's kind of good for me to reuse my copies so you can see what's shifting, because it's kind of good to know what adjustments I am making between versions, which is harder to do if I'm making a new pattern each time. But there will be a case today where I needed to revert back and I couldn't because I had been modifying the same sleeve as opposed to creating a new paper pattern each time. Now let me just see if I have the front shoulder where I want it. Honestly, the red line on this piece of muslin here kind of indicates that my shoulder would be best served by a curvy wonkadoodle shoulder line. And that's, again, to get a skin tight fit, to be really exacting to my body. I would probably take a little bit of a scoop out of the front of my shoulder line, but I mean, I make things that are quite close fitting, but I do want them to skim just along the edge of my body as opposed to being an actual second skin like a knit would be instead. But I'm going to go ahead and cut out a fresh new muslin to work on for today. Again, if you start with a pattern as opposed to starting with nothing, as I did in the last video, you will have less rounds than this. This is many, many rounds of muslins and paper. But again, another thing I want to point out is that this is an investment of both time and paper and muslin, and therefore money, in your future sewing endeavors. So this is going to save you frustration and making mockups in the future. You may need to make a lot of mockups while fitting your block pattern to make your fitting shell. However, that will mean that you know anything you make with it in the future already fits, and you don't have to make mockups of each new design. Unless you really want to, like if you're cutting into a really special fabric and you want to make sure that you have the design lines exactly where you want them, you don't need to make a new mock-up to see if something fits. You only need to make mock-ups to see if you are happy with the style lines, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So yes, this is a lot of muslin and mock-ups and work, but it's worth it in the end. And you may have better natural fit instincts than I do. Honestly, I kind of tend to go halfway and then have to go all the way and then go too far and then not enough. So I think my natural fit instincts actually aren't the best. And once again, I don't have to do this level of fitting very often at all. The last time I fit a full set of blocks on myself was at least 10 years ago, if not a little bit longer than that. So I don't have a ton of practice. I'm a little bit rusty, even fitting myself, because I don't normally have to do it. It has been over a decade since I had to go through this sort of process. And the only reason I'm doing it with you now again is as a demonstration, not because I even need a new pattern. Near the end of this video, I'll start making really tiny modifications, and that's the kind of thing that you can do using the block you've already made. So if you need to make small fixes in the future, you already have your blocks that are the correct proportions and like the correct lengths and everything for you. So it's easier to make adjustments to your block once it's been finished the first time. So I would never really go through this from scratch process again unless something major had happened with my body. So if I seem a little bit rusty and like I am going through a lot of versions, that's because I am. Once again, I never said I was a fit expert. I'm more of a designer and less of a tailor. I never claimed to be good at tailoring. I wish I was better, honestly. But it's not something I teach actually in fashion school, is fitting to real people. We always made things for standard size mannequins. I could never even try on the things I made in fashion school because I was much larger than the standard size mannequins we were working on. And we didn't really make things, for real people ever, which is kind of how the fashion industry works in general. Because in the fashion industry, they do tend to do a lot of draping, but that's because they have access to a lot of standard size dress forms, whatever dress form or fit model they want to use in-house. And also they are finding models that fit the standard as opposed to finding a standard to fit the people, They're not really working I mean, I don't want to say that models aren't people. They are, but they are people chosen specifically for fitting the standard dress form size, so that only very minor alterations are needed for the runway. And the departments that handle ready-to-wear and the clothes that actually end up on the racks at Neiman Marcus and Bergdorf's and all that stuff, those are actually usually not the same people who are cutting the patterns and cutting the clothes for the runway. They're not usually the same clothes, and they're not usually the same fit or team working on those different things. So inside baseball of fashion there a little bit. Anyway, I've been putting together this next muslin so that I can go ahead and try it on. Behind the scenes, it's been several days, so, my body may be a little bit different than the last time I tried this on as well. Let's just say, looking at the hormonal schedule, this was not the best week to try fitting anything on my body, mostly for potential frustration reasons, but also just general fluctuation. But that's the reality of the situation, so alas, we shall allow humanity as always. But here I am just checking things out, seeing what I might want to adjust. It looks like I might want a tiny bit more pinched out of the front darts here, so I'll just make note of that. And I do have some pulling and wrinkling appearing around the arm size, especially when I relax my arms. This armscye is super tight right here, which actually would allow a great range of mobility if I put a very tight little sleeve in here. It wouldn't be particularly comfortable, but I would be able to move my arm, which is kind of, again, something that seems oxymoronic, but weirdly enough, when the fabric and the armscye are very tight, you can roll your arm around and move your arms around. It's just going to be also quite tight up in your armpit, weirdly enough. But I probably should open up this armscye a bit, and it does look like it rolls off my shoulder a little too far, so I might need to bring that shoulder line up. So all these things are considerations I need to make. Again, you could do all this sort of work without seam allowance on your patterns as well. I'm just used to working with it, so I tend to forget if I don't include it in a pattern. I don't realize that I should cut something out thinking about adding seam allowance, because that's not how my brain is trained. So I work with seam allowance inherent in the pattern, but you don't have to if you're used to working the other way around. I'm just gonna go ahead and start drawing a new armscye on here, bringing these things out a little bit just because this is so very close along my arm. And again, yes, I am distorting my own body to be able to draw with one arm on the other, or to draw a new shoulder line while moving my shoulders. So it's not actually, the best practice, but it is all I've got, all by my lonesome here in the sewing room. And since I have drawn this on, I can actually take this over, take the muslin off, cut this excess off, and then try this back on for you. So I'll go ahead and do that. And I'm thinking, how much of this do I need to pinch out? At least a 1/2 inch. Let's just put a pin and crescent moon that extra wedge of fullness that needs to come out of the length of the back here. We can look at that later as well. But it is actually quite important to get your bodice fitting and your armscye and your shoulder fitting as well as you can before you start making the sleeve, because the sleeve will introduce new problems, but the sleeve could be fine and your bodice could be terrible, and you might blame it on the sleeve, but it's actually because the armscye is off instead of the sleeve. So it really is one of those things where you have to get both just right, or at least just right for you. There's no real correct anything, only what is correct for you, as I've said. And something I really struggle with is the correct shoulder line. I don't know why I have such trouble with this. Possibly because I'm raising and lowering my shoulders while trying to pin things, and that's part of the problem. Maybe if I had the buddy system, this would be less of a problem for me, but you'll notice I struggle with the correct shoulder all throughout this video, through several versions. So if you can tell me what I need to do, definitively let me know, because I always go through this battle of taking off too much, putting too much back on, back and forth with my shoulders. I can never decide how sloped they really are. Anyway, back over on the green table of grace here, because I'm learning to give myself some. Hence why I let myself have plenty of time for this video, and boy did I need it, because this is a lot. Again, I have no trouble sewing sleeves, but making a sleeve pattern like this, you'll note the length of this video today, it is no easy task. It's just worth it in the end, because after I have a sleeve that I like that fits into my bodice pattern, it's never a trouble doing the sewing. So imagine when you are stuck in the torturous process of fitting your sloper, just imagine that from then on, nothing will ever be as much of a struggle again. That's why this is a mountain that we have to get over into like the full meadow of flowers beyond. Unless you have allergies, in which case pick a different metaphor. But here I am just transferring my markings from my muslin onto my paper pattern. Version 6 here. Probably should have traced a new one, but here we are. So I took a good 1/2 inch off around this front armscye. I'm going to pinch out a little bit more from the dart again, so just take another, 1/8 of an inch at least, off of either side of the waist dart. In the back here I was again referencing how much I cut off of my muslin, laying that right on top of my paper pattern to see what I need to take off of the paper. I think I went a little too hard doing this, but that's okay. Again, I'm going to be doing many versions. You could be more cautious, but then again, if you're too cautious, everything is a compromise, especially in this process. So, put on a nice smelling candle, some relaxing music. Let Enya guide you through it. You know what I mean? This is a hard mountain to summit. Try and give yourself grace during the process. Give yourself time, and never try and do this sort of thing on a deadline. That's for sure, because it can be very frustrating, but it's important to put yourself in the right mindset of this being a learning process that is going to grant you a major boon at the end, having a fitting sloper pattern. So again, it's an investment, but in yourself and in your future sanity. Even if that means you have to go a bit mad today. Try not to. I guess what I'm saying is burn some incense, grab a big glass of water. Take care of yourself during this process. I was just transferring all of the markings from the muslin onto the paper pattern and cutting things back, and then redrawing in the seam allowance indication so I could see where the actual stitch line would be. And then I found these vintage instructions on how to do a sway back adjustment that I wanted to try, but honestly, I'll do another one in a minute, and it's just much easier to just take the wedge off the back of the waist, but this was a cute little idea to keep the grain lines consistent. You kind of just draw a box, keeping the grain lines, consistent, parallel to the grain lines, I guess. And then move the box up however much you want to take out. So in my case, a 1/2 inch. And then just like redraw the waistline in, like redraw the curve down here. Honestly, I think it's easier to just cut away the little bit of a curve from the waist. And I'll do that later because this was not enough. I could link to this image, though. Maybe it works if you have a lot. For me, things were subtle enough that I don't think... I could have gone harder. I only took a 1/2 inch away. Maybe I needed to take 1 inch initially. But this looked like 1/2 inch to me. So, who knows? We're in the middle of refining stuff. I don't have to get it all right this time. This was version 6. I'll set that muslin aside. And I will go ahead and trace a new copy of the front pattern here because again, the dart legs and the seam allowance indications have gotten pretty messy. So let's have a clean copy to work with for the next few rounds here. I'll transfer all the information over that I still will need, including the correct dart lines, double check, that kind of thing. It will actually be quite important to have the actual stitching line marked on the pattern for the sleeve drafting, if, like me, you are working with seam allowance on the patterns already. Often, slopers and blocks are done without seam allowance. But because I'm constantly cutting them out and then trying them on, I need that seam allowance in there, otherwise I will forget. Sometimes it's about knowing yourself, and knowing where you're most likely to mess up. Now again, as we refine the amount of dart pinch out here, this is the kind of thing where it's important to note that darts are not triangles, they are a percentage of a circle, the cone of the bust. And you can actually measure that percentage later on, and then you will know for the future what your dart fullness is, which is not a number, it is a percentage. So we can actually measure it with a protractor later on, but I'll talk more about that in a future video. Now we're going to need a couple of measurements in order to draft the sleeve here, and I will be following the Helen Joseph Armstrong method for this today, although you will not need a copy of Pattern Making for Fashion Design because I have scanned the particular pages you'll need for you. And maybe if you were to look in the description and go to my Pinterest, you could find them. And I'll also just be talking you through the whole process here today. And I even have a couple of adjustments to this standardized method that I will be including nearer the end of the video. And look who's shown up for work! Stripey Buddy, here to sit on my nice piece of paper that I need to draft our sleeve. But what I was doing there was using my flexible ruler to measure both the front and the back armscye and mark that both on the pattern and then on this little scrap piece of paper for myself. I will need a few more measurements before I can get started drafting my sleeve here, including the length of my arm. So I'll hold the end of the tape where I assume my shoulder tip needs to be, and I'll measure that. And for me, arm length is going to be 22 inches. And I need to measure around the fullest part of my bicep. Yours may or may not have ink included. It doesn't change the measurement and it can be quite expensive. So no problem there if yours are less patterned. My bicep is 13 inches, so I'm just going to mark that down on my scrap of paper here because I will need that measurement moving forward. Now here in the book, I'm going to look at this little measurement chart, which I'm usually the biggest size on these measurement charts in this book, but my sleeve length and bicep don't actually align with that. So I'm going to use the sleeve cap height indicated for the size 10 because the size 10 says 13 bicep, 22 length, which is what I have going on my actual arm. And because I'm going to be doing a full custom draft and fit of this sleeve into the bodice muslin anyhow, all I'm really grabbing from this size chart is the suggested standard sleeve cap height, which I, again, will be changing. It's just a starting point for getting the sleeve on the paper. And to get the sleeve on the paper, I will start by drawing a nice long line, teeing that off the top and marking that A. Then I will measure down my sleeve length, 22 inches, and mark that B. Then I will mark down the sleeve cap height, which for me is going to be 5 3/4 of an inch. I will then find the distance between C and B, mark the halfway point between those two, come up 3/4 of an inch from that halfway point, and mark that as D'. The next instruction at this point is actually to square off from each of those lines. So I will just draw a line out from each of those perfectly perpendicular to the first central line from A to B. And then we have to find a new measurement that may or may not be kind of silly. We're going to find the armhole measurement, which I don't really exactly know what that means, but that's just what Armstrong calls it. And for that, the book requests you add the front and back armscye measurements together, divide that by 2, and then add 1/4 of an inch. I personally think, sadly, this measurement matters less than the actual bicep measurement does, but that's probably just because my biceps are larger than they're quote-unquote supposed to be for like a standard sleeve draft, but whatever. I'll show you how I work around that as we go along today. In general, once you have the armhole measurement, you're going to hold the very tippy tip of your ruler at point A, and then you're going to swing the ruler along the line C here until it interacts at 9 1/8 of an inch for me. So until it hits that measurement, and that is where you will draw in this angled line that we will be using to create the sleeve cap in a moment here. So I've just shifted this ruler out until 9 1/8 of an inch hits the crossed line out from C. And now you want to go ahead and measure out from C half of your bicep measurement. So for me, with a 13-inch bicep measurement, that would be, of course, 6.5. So I'm going to measure 6.5 out from C each way. And then it says to find a midway point between that original angled line you drew and the bicep measurement. But because you're supposed to have ease around your bicep, I'm just going to use the larger line, which for me in this case is still the armscye, the armhole measurement. So I'm just going to use that original angled line we drew. But technically, if your bicep measurement lands far outside that line or far inside that line, you're supposed to find a middle ground. But also, even leaving in this extra 3/8 of an inch on either side or whatever it would be was not enough bicep ease. So I find the Armstrong text. So I've actually found a discrepancy in the Armstrong instructions that I find confusing. So we'll talk about that later. Anyhow, up here along the angled line, we're going to separate this into 4 equal parts. Find the calculator. In my case, the calculator and a decimal to fraction converter over on Google as well, because I'm old and math class was a long time ago. And I'm going to follow along with figure 3 from the Armstrong text, where you mark out standard set indications from each of these points. Why are each of these the length they are? I assume Armstrong knows, but I sure as hell don't. This is one of those things where I just trust the standard and then make modifications later if I have to. A lot of people tend to ask why, and I'm just not one of those people. If the expert, seems to have it figured out, I kind of just follow their advice until proven otherwise. These are the Armstrong standards. Maybe I shall set the TCH standards later today. Then I'm going to grab my French curve here and find the sleeve cap curve by lining this ruler up along first 3 measurements and then the next 3 measurements here. It scoops up over the top of the arm and then down into the underarm here, as you can see. And the fullness is shifted a little bit forward because your arms actually don't sit directly on the side of your body. They are actually kind of forward on your body. For that one, I do know the why, and it's because it's just how humans are. Next, where the underarm seam on the left here interacts with the squared out line from D', I need to mark a 1/4 inch out from that line and mark that as R. Then I need to measure the distance between R and D' and mark that center line along the line. Then I'm going to square out an indication an inch down from this line, and I just need to make this second dart leg the same length as the first. So I'll measure that and then reposition it down for this underside as well. The book then has you come towards the center line down here at the wrist 3/4 of an inch and mark that V. Draw a new line from U through V that is the same length as S to P on the other side. Label that new point down here W. Then from W to X, you're going to use the same distance as from O to P, the original wrist measurement. And where that X interacts up here on the original line, you're going to draw up from there to S and just blend that in. Again, this may sound quite confusing, but just study the instructions. I've linked them below for you. And I also have done this in a video before, so I can link in a card up to that because I went through this whole process in that video as well. Using the standardized instructions and measurements like this, not knowing the whys, I don't feel bad changing them, So this is just, again, to have something to work with on the paper. It's a rough draft. I'm not particularly concerned about, if these are going to work for me. I know I'm going to be making changes. Again, I'm not trying to get anything done in the first draft. That's just silly. As someone who writes fiction, trust me, nothing gets done in the first draft. Very little from the first draft remains in the final draft in life. And then I will cut it out and we can start seeing if it would actually even fit into my bodice pattern. I'm going to grab an awl, but you could also use like a sharp pencil or a seam ripper work well for this. Even a pin, really, but an awl would be perfect if you happen to have one. Again, didn't put that on the materials list. My apologies. But I'm going to go ahead and use that to line up the seam allowance of my new sleeve along, like for the back, along the back of my pattern's armscye here. And I'm going to see where the bodice pattern ends at the shoulder, and I'm going to mark that with an indication on my sleeve pattern here in blue marker. And as I walk these seams here, what I'm basically doing is finding out how much ease is built into this sleeve pattern. There should be some, but not nearly as much as they give you. I'm one of those who likes to take most, if not all, sleeve cap ease away, and I'll show you the results of which later in this video. But this has about a 1/4 inch of ease inherent in the back and about 1 inch of ease inherent in the front here, it looks like. And so normally you would re-true a center line in between those two indications. So although my center line is of course closer to the back here, when it comes to setting the sleeve in, my shoulder line needs to be in between those two indications as opposed to offset like that. Hopefully that makes some sense. And again, when I was talking about sleeves not being evil, I mean sewing them. I don't find sewing sleeves evil, but pattern drafting them, it's not the most fun. Let me just cut out a new muslin with all relevant modifications. Again, of course, if your last muslin will still work, then just use that. Sometimes your modifications are small enough where it's only cutting away as opposed to adding, and then you can just use the last one, but I'm just trying to keep it nice and clean for you for demonstration purposes, you know? Might as well go all the way. We're already in it. And I stitched all my darts, stitched that together for this next version. Version 7, as it were. Like so. And yes, I had some comments about, like, do you have to use muslin? Of course you don't have to use muslin fabric. I find it relatively inexpensive. Like muslin, I think this muslin is like $4 a yard. You can find it for even cheaper. And if you buy some muslin at Michael's, you can even possibly use a coupon. So you can get muslin itself for pretty cheap. But you don't have to use muslin. Any plain woven, like light to mid-weight fabric would work fine. Nothing too thick, nothing too stiff. It's just what I'm used to from fashion school and what I prefer. Again, this is an investment in some ways, so I don't mind making that investment and having really clean, standardized material to work with. But use whatever you've got. Make it work, as Tim Gunn would say. I've sewn my elbow darts. I've sewn my underarm seam here. I have put a line of gathering stitching up into the sleeve cap because, again, we know there's some ease inherent in there and we're going to have to gather it down. You're not supposed to have gathering along the sleeve cap. This isn't a puff sleeve. It's just supposed to create enough of an edge at the top there that can be eased in. So it's called sleeve cap ease because it's not supposed to be puff. It's just supposed to be eased, and you're supposed to ease it in. Coax the extra amount of fabric into the armscye. And a lot of times patterns have way too much cap ease, which is why you're always thinking to yourself, this doesn't fit in here. What are they smoking? Which I can't really answer that question, but they might be a robot, and that could be part of the problem. I would not be surprised if some patterns are algorithmically graded for commercial patterns. It would save a lot of time, I should think. But a miscalculation of cap ease is like the #1 complaint for a sleeve. Like, it's probably the reason you're sad in life. I have 1 1/4 inch of ease in this current sleeve cap, and even this is too much for me. So I think I do get a tiny bit of puckering in this, which is just not fun. But again, it's the first version, so we'll deal with that later. And if you've seen me set in a sleeve before, you know I like to pin the underarm to the side seam of the bodice first, and then pin the center of the sleeve to the shoulder seam, and then ease everything into place in between. I'm gonna bring it over to the machine, and you can see here, this is a bad camera angle to see what the needle is doing, but a okay camera angle to see what I'm doing with my hands, which is that I'm guiding this through the machine using my hand inside to make sure I'm getting as few puckers and miss stitches as possible. So I'm turning the entire project as I go, leaving the needle down, lifting the presser foot to move things around if I have to, and just easing this seam line through under the presser foot, using as much movement and refinagling as I have to get the stitching line smooth. What the rest of this looks like during the process doesn't really matter. You know, this is why we keep ironing throughout the process. Wrinkles will occur, especially in this crispy, sort of starched muslin, but that's all right. All that matters is the stitching line is smooth, and it's as smooth as it could be with this much darn cap ease. And honestly, it's probably better to use a larger stitch length at this point in the mock-upping process, because you might want to rip a sleeve out and then try a new one in the same bodice or vice versa. So it's it's probably better to use a larger stitch length and be able to seam rip it quickly. After I have the sleeve set in here, I will just pull out my gathering stitching and throw those threads away. You can clip the armscye as well, as I often do in my actual finished projects. But you can see, even where it's not actually puckered in the seam, it's puckering a little bit. And a lot of this, you're supposed to kind of steam it into place. But depending on what fabric you're using, too much sleeve cap ease is just still going to be too much sleeve cap ease, sorry. And here is my first test sleeve set into my garment. Now you can see I can't raise my arm very high. And as soon as I do, I start running into problems because this sleeve cap is just a little bit too tall for me to be able to move. It would be fine if I planned to never raise my arms, which is, again, saying something. So if you want to make a more formal garment where you're not planning on raising your arms very much and you want it to look like if you're prioritizing smoothness above all else, this is going to have less wrinkles and look more smooth with my arm down. The problem is I then can't make my arm go up. So again, deciding on sleeve cap height is a process of compromises. How smooth do you want everything to look, and how much do you want to be able to raise your arm? Notice how few drag lines there are on this sleeve while I have my arm down, and how many problems I run into when I raise my arm up. I'm noticing that there's also still a little bit of dart fullness sitting here above my arm, this little bit of wrinkling here. You do need a tiny bit of this, just again, to be able to move. You can get rid of all of it, but then again, can you move in something? So again, we are running into problems because I'm a person and not a mannequin. And I say problems, but it's more just areas where compromise will be needed. How smooth do you want something? How much mobility do you want to have? And if you add a gusset in here, you can completely move this, by the way. So that's something you can do if mobility is your highest concern. I'm going to take a little bit more dart fullness out of the front, just because this is too much of a wrinkle above the bust there. And we have some modifications to make to the sleeve as well. So back over here onto the cut table, I'm going to take another sliver off this center back. So I'm just going to take a crescent off the back of it, fade that into nothing at the side seam. I don't want to make the side seam less, but I need to take some more off the back length. So I'll just do that here because, well, I didn't really need that silly method last time and I'm not using it this time. And then again, I will take out an extra 1/8 of an inch from either side of my side dart this time, just because my waist dart is already big enough. Let's just throw some of this percentage up here into the side dart. And that will help take care of that pooling above the bust along the arm. I'm going to go ahead and modify my shoulder a tiny bit. Eventually, I will go too far. I always think that I have a sloped shoulder issue to fix, and exactly how sloped my shoulders are, again, is up for debate. Now I want to fold this dart closed and make sure that I have my shoulder tip in the same area, and I was thinking, I've been fiddling with this shoulder. Maybe the shoulder is fine and the neckline is off. There you go. So as I line the paper pattern back up, I want to be able to walk this seam and make sure the stitching line is the same. And here I am adding a little bit to the tip of the shoulder on the back pattern here. Again, just trying to make note of things when I'm wearing the darn sloper. Take notes even on a sticky note, and then make those fixes once I'm back over here. So I fixed the dart, I've modified the shoulder slope a tiny bit, added a tiny bit onto the armscye itself at the shoulder. There's kind of how far the shoulder line comes out along the arm, and then where the shoulder line tips along from your shoulder tip to your neckline. 2 different points of shoulder fitting, I suppose. And I'm going to just go ahead and remeasure my arm size as I go, just to kind of keep track of whether or not my sleeve should still fit in here. So because of the tiny bit of modification I made to this back, the pattern is now 3/8 of an inch longer. The stitching line is 3/8 of an inch longer, which means that 3/8 of an inch of ease that is still inherent in my pattern will be eaten up by this length. So I don't need to eliminate all of the ease in my sleeve cap because I just eliminated some of it by changing the armscye. This is why having the correct armscye is so important when it comes to drafting the sleeve pattern. And yes, here again, I'm thinking, all right, the shoulder I already messed with, so let's just fix this seam along the neckline instead. Come on, kid. Once again, I must stress with you that while I'm demonstrating this all for you, I am no fit expert. I'm just doing my best. Haven't done it for 10 years, so I do need to brush off all the accumulated rust over several muslins and mockups. And at this point, I've been recording for a while, and it's past coffee time. I probably should grab a refreshment in order to have the strength to go on. All right, I've taped my dart closed so I can get an idea of what the darn shoulder line is supposed to be like here. I've brought the neckline of the back closer to my neck, like so. Just because the shoulder line I had where I wanted it, so if I need this seam to be longer, might as well just extend it back towards the neck and see what happens. Again, this is a whole process of trial and error here, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And in some ways, I guess that makes me a good person to demonstrate this because I don't know what I'm doing either. So if you are also inexperienced, welcome. I'll redraw on where my seam allowance needs to be. And again, measure that once again so I can see what that would be. So 9, looks like I said 9 3/8, as opposed to it was 9 before. So I've added 3/8 of an inch to the stitching line, which means 3/8 of an inch of my sleeve cap ease was just eaten up by being set into this larger armscye. It does seem a little unfair that I am working, but the cats in here are napping. Although I can't nap unless I'm sick. I do have a tiny bit of a headache though. Again, because I haven't had my coffee yet. I am sadly addicted to caffeine. All right, now let's work on lowering this sleeve cap a little bit so I can have a better range of motion, and in doing so, actually eliminating some of my sleeve cap ease as well. So I'm going to go ahead and cut down the center line and then cut down the bicep level line as well. And we're going to go ahead and layer this closed. Now, if you wanted more sleeve cap ease to make your sleeve cap higher and a little bit of bicep ease, just swing this open instead. But I'm going to swing it closed because I want to get rid of cap ease and I want my cap to be a little bit lower. I'm just going to tape on a little bit of extra paper so I can see a center line here. And I'm going to overlap this until I've closed up 75% of my sleeve cap ease. So I'm going to leave 3/8 of an inch in here because again, we just added it onto the pattern, so I'm going to need it somewhere. And then I will go ahead and layer the rest of this closed so that hopefully I only have an inherent 3/8 of an inch of ease in this pattern now, which is what I need to fit into the back. Hopefully that makes any sense. And the sleeve cap has come down a little bit in this process as well. And I'll just tape down all my floops, of course, like so. And I'll redraw that bicep level line and redraw in the center line as well with a Sharpie here. So I need something that will go over tape at this point. This is my new center line here as well, just to keep track of that. Now I was thinking I do need this to be a bit longer, and maybe I need the elbow dart to be a bit lower. This is an incorrect instinct, but you know, who doesn't have a few of those? So I'm going to go ahead and lengthen this from above the elbow dart, because I was thinking maybe the elbow dart needs to be lower and this will sit even smoother. Incorrect. The elbow dart needs to be surprisingly high above the elbow to create the right bend in the sleeve and then like to put the excess that you need back there in the correct place. The reason that we have an elbow dart is so that there's a little bit more room in the back of the sleeve because again, your arm doesn't hang perfectly straight at your side. It bends slightly forward in a neutral position. So that's what this dart is accounting for. And for some reason I had the instinct, maybe that needs to be lower. It doesn't. So just add it onto the hem, add it onto the hem. Now to make this sleeve cap even lower, I'm actually going to bring up the sides of my sleeve 1/4 of an inch on either side, like so, just because I felt like I needed to lower that sleeve cap even more. Oh, someone's having fun in their bassy car outside. Perhaps you can hear that, perhaps you cannot. Depends on which of you are wearing headphones. To the headphone users, I apologize in general. My audio is not a number one. I haven't bought a new microphone in a long time. I need to invest in equipment, but instead I bought a house. All right, so I've brought the side of the sleeve cap or the underarm seam up 1/4 of an inch. Now again, I need to redraw my bicep line. Silly me. Like so. I'm measuring how tall my sleeve cap is. It was 5 3/4. I think it's now 5 1/4. Oh, and now it's 4 7/8. All right, well, sounds too short, honestly. Brought it down nearly an inch. Probably too much. All right, so because the fronts of my muslin are fine and I haven't made a ton of changes that require cutting a new one, I just pinched a little bit more out of the dart and I can do that without having to cut anything new. I will take the fronts off my muslin from last time and reuse the fronts, but I will cut a new back just because I changed that back neckline. So I'm just going to re-true this shoulder line against my pattern since I made a small modification there. And again, I just need to take a little bit more out of this side dart because that's what I did on the paper pattern for this last round. Version 8, as it were. And like so. Set those next to the machine. And again, I need to take a tiny sliver off this shoulder line. Always trying to make a sloped shoulder adjustment, even though I think... Are my shoulders more sloped or less sloped depending on the day? Is that my problem? Is it that I am both somehow? How slouchy am I? Too slouchy is the answer. I will go ahead and cut out the modified sleeve. Again, I need to sew in the dart, mark the center, all that jazz. You can actually work on just the sleeve cap, by the way, if you want to. So if you want to do the initial fitting with like a short sleeve and just measure maybe 3 inches down from the bicep level and just work with a short sleeve and use less muslin and less paper as you at least refine the sleeve cap, you totally can. But if you want to see how the sleeve is hanging from shoulder to wrist, you of course will need to cut out the whole shebang. And I cut out my new muslin back here, so I just need to mark my darts and sew everything in, make sure all indications are here. Part of the reason I'm leaving this footage in is so that you know that I'm not cheating and that I am using each round of paper patterns to make each round of muslin. I'm trying to use as little movie magic as possible and actually go through the gauntlet with you all. All right, muslin on my body. Here we go. How's it going? The light's too high. We can't see anything. All right, let's just turn that down a little bit so you can actually see where the pull lines, the wrinkles are. See, we still have a tiny bit above the bust, but we've taken a little bit more dart fullness out of here. And the sleeve with no sleeve cap ease and with the sleeve cap lowered a almost full inch, it's too tight now. So I've gone the other direction. So you can see there's just no ease at all along that sleeve cap. And now I can maybe raise my arm a little bit more, but there's more wrinkling in the back for sure. And it's not comfortable. Like, it's too painful with no sleeve cap ease and no bicep ease. There's not enough bicep ease in this either, which is part of the reason that removing all the sleeve cap ease created such a tight sleeve. Because the bicep line of this sleeve pattern is probably 14 inches. And weirdly enough, the Armstrong text does mention that your bicep of your pattern should be 2 inches longer than your bicep. But it doesn't account for that in the drafting at all, so I find that quite strange. And also, we still have pull lines at the shoulder, and these are the kind of lines where it goes from the neckline down like this. And these sort of pull lines are supposed to indicate that I need to take more off the tip of the shoulder, but honestly, I need to put more on. So once again, I will put more on, and then later I'll take it off because I can never decide what's going on with my shoulder. If one of you is a fit expert, and you're suffering through watching me make this video, do tell me. Do tell. We're keeping it real today, all right? We're keeping it real. Although I am clearly in favor of tough love and telling you that you need to give this all a try, because you do, I don't want to sugarcoat it and say that this isn't difficult. But then again, fitting any commercial pattern is also a pain in the ass, so I figure, why don't you just fit this one and then never fit anything else again? So I understand it's a pain in the ass, but like, why not have that kind of problem once instead of all the time? That's basically my thesis. But transferring over all tiny changes onto my bodice pattern once again. This is why I said last time, oh, I'm not done fitting this bodice, because once you put the sleeve in there, you start to notice all kinds of different problems. That's kind of the problem with fitting the sleeve, is that you're not really fitting the sleeve. You're fitting the sleeve and the bodice. You may think you're done with part one, but you never are. All right. Meanwhile, the sleeve. I haven't noticed that the elbow extension has caused me problems, so I'm not going to do anything this time with that, which is unfortunate. I am, however, going to go ahead and just widen this whole sleeve an inch. I've seen bicep widening done mostly by adding a 1/2 inch along the sides and kind of tapering that in, but like, why not just move that side line out by adding an inch along the center? So that's what I'm going to do. Just add an inch along the center of my whole darn sleeve here, because this does not have enough bicep ease. Again, for someone who has more cookies than CrossFit in their life. If I were the type of millennial who wore a slogan shirt, that might be mine. More cookies than CrossFit. I wish I were stronger. One day I will focus on physical health, but it ain't this day. All right. And mental health, actually. Again, we haven't gotten to it yet. All right. This did make my sleeve cap a little bit wonky up here, so I'm just going to take my French curve and just re-smooth this off along the back here where things have gotten a little funky. And the front's still fine, but the back just needs a little bit of smoothing, which apparently Oliver was disapproving of, but what does he know? No more than I do, that's for sure. All right, like so. We've added in a full inch here, but of course that means there's another full inch of sleeve cap ease we've added in, which is probably too much. The correct balance of sleeve cap ease, I think it's probably like 3/8 of an inch total, but not 1 inch and not 0. Perfectly 0, no. More than 1/2 an inch, probably no. Again, I'm going to walk my seams and find out how much I have sitting in here. After this bit of a behemoth of a video, I am hoping to go to a big antique market this week. So we'll see if I make it out there. It's kind of far from where I live, so it's quite the drive there and back, but it's supposed to be the largest antiques fair in New York State, so probably worth it, right? It's going to be so hot outside, though. I have to remember to get some water, because if I don't bring water, I will regret it. Let me just mark where my new center line needs to be, halfway between the ease on both sides. We're going to leave all this ease in here because I got afraid of the no ease last time. I figured maybe I need more, so we'll leave that inch of ease in there. But, is an inch too much? Yes, thank you for asking. And I did bring this back armscye back out a little bit along the back here so that it wasn't pulling as much across the center back, because I felt like I needed a tiny bit of width back in there. Again, it's all about finding the correct compromise between too much and too little in all these tiny areas. If you want to make slightly oversized things or things with a lot of gathering and nothing that's like perfectly smooth anyway, then you don't have to get this perfect. Like at this point, the bodice and sleeve here are close enough to make things if I was only ever planning on using a puff sleeve anyway. Like if I was only ever going to be modifying the sleeves to be larger, to be like a puff tulip sleeve or a giant bishop sleeve, this would be just fine. But because sometimes I make a fitted sleeve, I'm trying to get it right. And because I'm trying to save on muslin, I will have a center back seam on my back this time. Because yet again, I'm making another muslin to show you what those small modifications look like. And Oliver is just being so incessantly helpful here, as you can see. Oh, buddy. At one point, he climbs on top of my shoulders while I'm working over here. I might have been earlier in the video here. He climbed on top of my shoulders, as he is right now, and he was so excitedly nuzzling my ear that he was drooling, and drool dripped from him down onto the paper. So that's a major TMI. He loves me a lot, and I love him back, but it is a little much sometimes. It's a little much. All right, so once it comes to setting this new sleeve into this new muslin, you can see all of the sleeve ease sitting up in here. Again, I have that gathered down. And we're going to try not to get puckers. I think on one side I got no puckers, but the other side I did get a couple. Because again, 1 inch is too much sleeve ease. I thought I was going to be talking about sleeve cap height this whole time, but honestly I'm talking about sleeve ease. Both are a conundrum, all right? And once you have the general shape of things in place, and like things aren't disastrous, it's again, trial and error, finding the correct compromise. And may your guesses be better than mine. That is all I can wish for you. We are in the crucible of it now. Luckily, the good news is after the sleeve is done, like after we've adjusted the bodice and the sleeve here, then the hard part is done because the skirts are so much easier to fit. Like the skirt blocks are so much easier to fit than any of the rest of this. So this is the last, like, summit of the hill, which is why it's so awful, I suppose. We're above the tree line at this point. There's not even anything fun to look at on this hike. I do not understand people who climb mountains because once you are above the tree line, there's nothing fun enough to see. I'm sorry. I don't need a view, I need a leaf. And those are the facts. Although I am truly sad about not really being able to go hiking here because there are many gorgeous forests and trails, but I am deadly afraid of ticks. Give me all your advice on that one, nature people, because I would love to go hiking, especially in the fall with the orange leaves out here, like in Vermont and stuff, but ticks. So what do I do? What do I do? Sleeves. They are in. What's happening? I'm in a muslin. It's a different day. You can tell because my lipstick is darker. All right. I think this is a little bit better than last time, but again, we do still have quite the wrinkle along the bend in the back here. Again, that's just half due to imperfect fit and half because if you're going to have your sleeve cap be lower, you're going to have more wrinkles. This is the compromise you make. A perfectly smooth sleeve with an arm at rest, you're not going to be able to raise that arm. So you have to decide what is more important to you, raising your arm or perfectly smooth sleeves. And I'm thinking maybe this elbow dart is too low and it's causing weird twisting on the sleeve. Yes, it is, kid. Thank you for noticing at last. So you can see I can raise this a full 90 degrees, which is good, but it does mean that there's a little bit of extra fabric in the back of the sleeve. And like that sleeve cap ease is nice in the top of my sleeve, but it's just so annoying to sew that I'm not going to be dealing with that. And again, this shoulder doesn't look perfect. It looks better than last time though, actually. Again, in hindsight. All right, I'm thinking maybe I need to bring this out along my arm some more. That's kind of the problem with being a person as opposed to like a doll that doesn't have like the lines marked on, like a mannequin has the seam lines marked on the mannequin. Isn't that convenient? But I'm a person. I don't have the shoulder seam marked on my body or like where the shoulder should end and my arm begins. It's hard to say where one body part begins and ends on an actual person. So at this point, I'm just kind of trying to decide. And I've decided to bring my shoulder tip out a bit, even though I believe in the beginning of this video, I cut it off. Again, compromise, trial and error, mindfulness, grace, and peaceful thoughts. Maybe a little bit of, like spa music in the background. Actually, just temporarily tape my shoulder seam together of the pattern to add that same distance on to either side here. Add a little wedge to each piece. And again, I'll fill everything in and tape that down. The amount of floopage and extra paper along the arm sides at this point is getting absurd. Probably need to trace new copies of this stuff. Again, I need to make sure this is still working, like so, and I don't need to make any modifications to the neckline. Darn shoulders, I tell you. Now, let's go ahead and just close this extra length that I added in here because, no, don't do that. Turns out, if anything, I need the elbow dart to be higher. So, work from that assumption, and I will go ahead and just add on an inch to the hem if I want this to be longer. It doesn't help that muslin, especially this muslin I'm using from Mood, has a bit of starch in it. So it does kind of want to crawl up my arm just because of the fabric, not necessarily. Like if I had a sleeve made out of like slinky rayon lining, it would probably lay a little bit smoother. All right, so I still have this inch in here. Let's get rid of some of that. Once again, I will close my cap a little bit, but of course it's already too low. So to do this and eliminate this cap ease, it's going to lower my sleeve cap even more, and arguably my sleeve cap is too low already. So this is only going to create more mobility, but also more wrinkling on my sleeve if I lower my sleeve cap any further. So I want to eliminate this ease, but the side effect of doing that is I will also be lowering the sleeve cap, which is probably not for the best in this instance. It's starting to get to the point where I've lowered this enough that I'm probably distorting the sleeve cap shape too much. It's becoming too shallow. So I'll show you how I solve that in the next version, because this is not the final version today. I know. Again, we're into the nitty-gritty bits now, okay? This is our Everest, and you may need additional oxygen. Also, the cicadas have just started singing outside, or something has. It sounds like someone's shaking maracas outside my window. Tiny, tiny maracas. I wish it were just cicadas holding castanets. Something about that would be far more amusing. All right, once again, I'm going to take another sliver off my shoulder. I didn't need to do this. This was a mistake. I truly cannot decide what my shoulder line is supposed to be, as we can tell. I'm going to take a sliver off the bottom of the armscye as well to match, just so that I don't change the actual stitch line length at this point. From the front and the back, again, this is like less than 1/8 of an inch. It's like 1/16 of an inch, so talk about minor modifications at this point. But because I did bring the shoulder tip out again, I probably don't have enough within the seam allowance, so I'm just going to cut a fresh muslin. You could probably make it work if you seam rip the whole darn thing apart. But again, I'm not here to conserve muslin. I'm here to give you a clean demonstration. So here I am, cutting out another one. Am I ready to sew anything other than a mock-up right now? Yes. I've made so many muslin mock-ups in the last 2 weeks. I'm really ready to make like an actual piece of clothing again. We might need to bring out the big guns, which in this case is Dance Fever by Florence and the Machine. Also, Florence and the Machine new music teaser this week, kids. Is anyone else as excited as I am? That's what I thought. How else are we supposed to get through this world without Florence and the Machine, at least to scream along to? Because Oof doesn't even begin to cover it. All right, transfer everything over. Sew all my darts. Sew my next mock-up together. My next mock-up. Ooh, I really do need that cup of coffee. Nearly there, nearly there. I am just using like up all my random bobbins over here and stuff. I'm not like being particular about my thread color or anything. I used gray thread because I had a couple of spools of it and it seemed like something I could waste on this. And then I was just using up anything that was left on various bobbins. Good way to use up extra bobbin thread after a project is over. And I will go ahead and again set in my sleeves. Again, they're still gathering in the sleeve cap to help me set that properly. It's just supposed to like be just enough ease in the cap that it rolls over the shoulder, but not enough that it's a pain in the ass, which is what I seem to have going on here, even though I do believe we eliminated sleeve cap ease, did we not? Ay, 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 ay. The relationship between the bicep and the sleeve cap, it's rough. And this is the kind of thing that I had zero training in fashion school, by the way. Even though I went to fashion school in California, in London, and in Paris at various points, there was never any training on fit of any kind. I don't even know if there was like optional electives or not. Not that I remember. Truly, they are training you to either end up like as a creative director, just designing and not really fitting, or working for like the Gap and just pulling up the files on the computer, you know, and not much in between. Apprenticeships would be awesome if they like made you apprentice under a like master tailor. Maybe in London they do that kind of thing, but not at my school. I was at an international school there, so on a study abroad program. Not over at Seville Row, that's for sure. So here's my latest muslin here, and as we can see, plenty of wrinklage going on when I lower my arm, because the sleeve cap is at this point just too low, honestly, for my taste. And though I can raise my arm a good, 100 degrees, it's just not worth it to me for this much wrinkling at the back. At least it's hanging a little bit better and not twisting as much because the elbow dart is in the correct place, or closer to the correct place. And thus it is at this point, using all I have learned about myself and about this sleeve, I'm going to draft a fresh one using Armstrong's instructions, but my own instincts. I have decided that the sleeve cap has become too distorted and I need to draft a new copy. But instead of following the instructions to the T, I will be making slight modifications to the Armstrong standards. Follow along at your own peril. And yes, this paper was under Sophia this time, so each paper has at least been blessed by a cat. Again, I'm going to true line down the center of my alphanumeric. I'm going to square off the top and label that A, just like last time. I'm going to measure down 22 inches for the length and label that B. I'm going to label the sleeve cap depth the same, 5 3/4 inches, as recommended by the Armstrong text for my bicep measurement. But instead of marking the bicep level here with the 13 inches of my actual bicep, I'm going to include the 2 inches of ease that apparently the finished pattern is supposed to have. I don't know where this is supposed to come from unless I add it in now. So that's what I'm going to do, and we're going to see how it goes. So instead of using the armhole measurement, instead of using the bicep measurement, I'm going to use the bicep measurement plus 2 inches, then divide that by 2, and mark out from C here and draw in my angled lines from there. So in my case, my bicep measurement is 13 inches. I will add 2 inches of ease to get 15 inches, divide that by 2 along this line here for 7.5 inches out from C on either side. So that my bicep line is actually 15 inches, the 2 inches of ease that I'm quote-unquote supposed to have. Don't know where she was expecting me to find it, but I'm just going to go ahead and add it in and see how it goes. At this point, I'm feeling experimental. It's late. It's like 9 p.m. I'm ready to get wild over here. Everything else I will keep pretty consistent. I'm going to, again, put the elbow dart in right where they suggest. I assume it's not just Helen Joseph Armstrong that wrote this whole book. I assume that's a they. She had to have at least a couple of interns or something. Master's students, if such a thing exists in the writing of fashion textbooks. Haven't a clue. Again, I'm going to draw the line that is the same as S to P over here from U through V to W. Like so. Luckily, this is like the 8th time I've done this recently, so I'm ready to go. I have half the instructions memorized. But most importantly, in addition to using the actual bicep plus bicep ease measurement up here, to draw my sleeve cap, I'm going to make a couple of adjustments to the suggested markings as well. So again, separate this into equal 4 parts here, like so. But for the little lines that come out from here, I've made my own suggestions. I think this shape needs to tip forward and scoop out forward a little bit extra, so I'll show you how I manage that. On the left-hand side here, I will use the Armstrong measurements, which is 3/8 of an inch in, 1/4 of an inch out, and then 5/8 of an inch out from this angled line. But on the other side, I'm going to add an additional 1/8 of an inch at this top one. So instead of using 3/4, I'm going to use 7/8. Here in the center, I'll keep it the standard, 3/16 out. And then down here, instead of a 1/2 inch in, I'm going to use 5/8 of an inch in. So I'm just going to distort the front of the cap a little bit extra. So it comes forward a little bit more up at the top and comes in a little bit more down at the bottom. This is due to some research I was doing involving, again, removing cap ease. Some suggested that this sort of a shape, more of a scoop in the front and much more like a smoother back and a scooped front, is a better shape for the actual shape of a human arm. So we're going to give it a try here. In addition to having the bicep ease in place initially, as opposed to having to add it in later. Let me add some seam allowance on here. I will still need to lower the sleeve cap because, again, I know it's too tall, but I didn't want to distort this shape by having it be lower to start with. I want to distort the shape myself later. You'll see what I mean. Also, if you've made it this far into the video and you've been watching the whole thing, you are a real one. And if I had gold stars, I would hand them out to you. But I sadly am stickerless. I do have some cookies downstairs. I have some chocolate peppermint cookies that I made from Trader Joe's. And if you want one, they're a little gooey. I should have baked them for a little longer, but you can totes have one because it's a lot of cookies for me to eat all by myself, and I probably shouldn't. Otherwise, I'll have to redo my bicep again. All right, once again, let's walk these seams, see how much ease is still inherent in this pattern. Like so. All right. Let me tell you what, it's going to be plenty. So just mark that like so on the front of the pattern. So I have a good at least inch of ease in the back. Yikes, way too much. And I'll walk the front here again, just using my awl to help me with that. Lining up the stitching line with the stitching line. And I'll mark where that is here on the front. So not only do I have an inch of ease on the cap in the back, I have an 1.25 inches here in the front. So that's 2. I think I have 2.5 total. Far too much. I need to get rid of some of that. Plus, I know I want to lower my sleeve cap as well. So let's go ahead and take out those 2 inches of ease and take out the sleeve cap height at the same time. So I'm going to draw a line midway between A and C here. And then I'm going to take out that inch of ease below it, which will take out 1 inch on either side by the time I'm done. I'm going to go ahead and fold this into a little pleat. kind of pleat down my sleeve cap like so. Fold that close, so I've pinched away a full inch in there of the sleeve cap height, which also is reducing either side by an inch along the stitching line. Let's grab some spare paper here, and I'll just smooth these jagged edges back down using my French curve ruler to find a compromise between the two edges here, like so, and like so. Cut away the excess, and let's just see how that goes. I've seen this method of reducing sleeve cap height mostly with knits, but there's a lot of sleeve tutorials for knits, and I'm like, knits? Man, if you make a knit sleeve a little bit too small, that it'll just stretch to fit you. So I feel like fitting a knit sleeve has got to be easier than fitting a woven sleeve, but I'm sure some of the methods are interchangeable. So as you're looking at me, on the left-hand side of the screen is the new sleeve, and the right-hand side. And honestly, they don't look very different. They do feel a little different. There's more ease in the newest draft, like so. And I think there's a slight less bit of wrinkling in the back because the sleeve cap is a tiny bit taller than the last janky version. I think it's hanging a little bit smoother too, honestly. So this is my favorite so far. Again, is it perfect? Absolutely perfect? No. Luckily I don't use my plain, like, long sleeve much. I usually at least add puff to it, and then it fits just fine. So I think I do still have a tiny bit more fit work to do on this, but this is going to be the last version I construct for you for this video, because the next video will be all about fit as well, so I might as well refine mine even further in that video. But this is as far as I got today, drafting my sleeves, and those are my modifications to the Armstrong starting point, to the Armstrong standard. I think they help create something a little bit smoother from the start. You'll have to let me know, this sleeve or this sleeve. I think the one with the slightly higher cap and the more bicep ease is better. It just hangs a little smoother. So the one on the left-hand side of the screen is my favorite. But again, if you are a true fit expert, feel free to give me your advice. Again, this is not my area of expertise. I'm better at kind of like looking at a design and being able to copy the design. I guess I'm better at pattern manipulation than I am at fitting. But I suppose I've already given that disclaimer enough at this point. Thank you for sticking with me anyhow. I just want you to know that I am in the trenches with you, but I'm only here because I'm trying to help you and feel empathy with you, because I already have a fitting pattern and I don't actually need to do any of this out of anything other than my love for you. And wouldn't you look at that, the shoulder is now too sloped? Oh, come on. Now I need to take a wedge out of the other side? Oh, goodness. Yes, now it is too sloped. So I'll have to fix that in the next video as well, honestly. I can't be the perfect fit model for everyone, but luckily I'm not the only milliner on the internet. Go forth and find thee thy own soothsayer. Besides, the correct fit is all about compromise, but I'll have more from that particular soapbox in the next volume of Drafting Dangerous. I do hope this was at least somewhat helpful, and thank you as always for watching, and a huge thank you to my patrons who make my work and these videos possible.